Hi, I'm Leslie Meredith with Breakbulk Events and Media. I'm here in Dubai in the studio with Eliska Mundell from Emirates SkyCargo. She has just finished moderating a panel on innovation in air transport, air cargo. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Leslie.
All right. Well, tell us some of the highlights of your panel.
Well, we had a great panel actually put together. So we had Dikran, who's from ABB, and he's the transport manager there. So he's from what we would call the shipper side, moving the actual equipment, the heavy lift cargo. Then we had Wayne from Expeditors. He's running the project side, so he's from the freight forwarding. So they will be managing that for that shipper. Then we had Nick, who's from Air Charter Services, who's a charter broker, which I used to be a long time ago.
Okay.
And myself from the carrier side. So we would work with the charter brokers or with the freight forwarders on the movement. So the idea was that we had somebody from each part of the evolution of the movement of the heavy freight that handles it at the different points. And we talked about the variation of why we would use air freight instead of sea freight. And talked about aircraft chartering and some of the challenges, some of the costs, and also looking towards the future, really, of air transport, particularly for heavy lift cargo.
Right, exactly. So are there any changes? You know, if you weren't informed about the industry, say in the last 5 years, would you say that it's evolving in some ways, or are there things people should know today?
Yeah, I think one of the main things that came out of today was particularly the development of the air cargo network. In the old days, it used to be if you needed to move something urgently, and that's mainly when heavy lift or project cargo got moved by air, and they'd have to take a whole aircraft, a full charter. It was the only option. It would be very expensive, very costly, and was something we know that would be a huge impact on their budgets. What we found certainly in the last 5 or 10 years is that the air freight network, the scheduled network of carriers like Emirates, we've grown so much. So we're serving so many more places with full freighters. So what that means is that rather than having to take a whole aircraft, depending on the size of the piece, they can take a part charter, or we can do a diversion. So there's a lot more flexibility on moving this. So what we were examining is, has that had an impact on the actual supply chain planning from their side, where they would normally look at sea freight and then only air freight in emergencies? Are they now looking for air freight sometimes? And what they're trying to do is they perhaps will have a contingency for air freight, but they're still, because of a cost, still trying to use sea.
But it sounds like I was just speaking with one of your panelists, that there are times and conditions when air transport makes sense. Exactly. Not necessarily an emergency, but...
Exactly, in your planning, yeah. If you're going to a very remote location and you can't access it, your option is by sea freight to the port, particularly in Africa, which is really, really landlocked, effectively. Some of those central countries, if it's a mining equipment or oil and gas, depending, and you can't move it by road, and it can be very sensitive equipment. So moving it on certain types of roads, they may not be paved. The equipment, they may not have air ride suspension trucks for handling sensitive equipment. I did a lot of movement of equipment into Afghanistan. Obviously, again, the option they had was to sea freight it to Karachi port and move it by road. Then the problem, obviously, it was a difficult, long journey, and mainly this was military equipment, but a lot of heavy generators that they were moving in. And there were the threat of attacks of all sorts of things. So, you know, it's different ideas. So Afghanistan was fantastic because everything had to move by air and it could go in directly. And the same as places like Africa. We have an extensive network into Africa on our freighter network. So it's very easy to divert an aircraft for a piece and drop it off, as long as the handling capabilities are there at that airport to offload it, etc.
Yes, of course, and we talk so much about risk management, and this sounds like, as we discussed, in certain conditions, it can vastly lower the risks associated with the cargo movement as well.
Exactly. You know, we transport a lot of very sensitive equipment, for example, aircraft engines. You damage an aircraft engine, brand new Rolls-Royce or GE engine, that can cost millions. And that could be just by a slight knock or a bump, a very simple thing. But you're moving it by air, it's very secure, it's very safe. but also the risk element of moving into certain countries. You take away a lot of these other factors there because you're moving it direct to that point, or the closest point that it can get to. If it can't go on a scheduled network airport, it can often go into a smaller secondary airport on a charter aircraft. So that's why there's opens up your opportunities to get a lot closer.
Right, and do you see those types of opportunities in the GCC, in this region?
It's probably not within this region since everything stopped moving in Iraq, Afghanistan. That was the bulk of the business for a long time.
Okay.
You know, Iraq less so. At the beginning, everything was air freighted into Iraq, and then the same for Afghanistan. But once that sort of pulled out of the region, the network is here. You've got international airports. You've got a road network throughout the GCC Middle East. So it's not a huge requirement here. It's more to more remote areas like Africa.
Ah, I see. Well, that gives us a much more clear picture. Very interesting. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.